Olivier. Thanks for being in our Athens Power BI user group. It's an honor to have you. I know personally Olivier from a couple of sessions that we had together in the past, speaking in some venues. Great technical guy, great sessions. Therefore, I'm pleased that he was willing to speak to us in our group and share knowledge and experience. The rest, I think, Olivier, I will let it to you to introduce yourself and start the presentation.
Thanks again for coming. Cool. Let's get started. So, hi, good morning, or probably good afternoon or evening to all of you. Welcome to my session about migrating from SQL Server reporting services to Power BI. Having me and to the attendees, thanks for being here today. My name is Olivier van Steenlandt. I'm a BI team lead working for a company called X2O. X2O is a retail organization located in Belgium with stores in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. At X2O, I'm mainly known as the person who makes the BI development planning and the person who's always looking for ways and opportunities to support business even more. In my spare time, I'm a core member for DataMinds. DataMinds is a Belgian data user group focusing on the Microsoft data platform. Besides DataMinds, I do a bit of speaking and blogging as well, mainly about topics where I'm running into on my day-to-day job. So I'm always talking and writing about things about personal experience, actually. In case you have any questions during the session today, please feel free to ask away in the chat window. If you have questions tomorrow, next week, next month, doesn't really matter. Feel free to reach out. You can find my contact details via the QR code on the screen or via my personal website as well, datacuisine.com. Of course, today, I'm going to take you on a journey that I've been experiencing in 2023. So first, I will set the scene and explain where I started my journey to migrate from reporting service to paginated reports. And first, I will be explaining where we were as a data team and what the business was used to use and how they were acting on certain reports. And then, of course, we're going to talk how we're going to be able to move forward as well. Of course, since it is a migration session, we will be talking, or the main section about this, section about this in this session will be about the migration itself, of course. And for the people who heard of me, well, I don't really like theoretical sessions. So I will have a quite extensive demo around the 50% mark of the presentation. Near the end of the session, we're just going to get back to the slides to have a brief recap about limitations and benefits as well. Cool. Let's keep things moving. So, first of all, today I feel quite adventurous. And I would like to climb a mountain, and this mountain will lead us to the top where we are going to reach our goal, which is migrating from reporting service to paginated reports. But before we can start our journey, we need to know exactly where we are, which is at the foot of that mountain. And as a first thing that we're going to do, we're going to take a look at this one from the data team point of view. Now, what does the data team used to do, or where they used to work with? Well, first of all, the data team, or myself as well, we were used to work with SQL Server, integration services, and analysis services more at the backend side of the data platform. And on the front-end side, we were working with SQL Server reporting services and Power BI. Now, the first question we need to ask is, well, where are we currently using reporting services for? So that's because of this. So we are using reporting services for our pixel perfect and printable reports. And how did we actually set up our reporting service environment? Well, we were creating a solution or a folder per department. So we had our sales solution, our logistics solution, our finance solution, and so on. And then we were deploying 2 dedicated folders on reporting services, which all had their dedicated security as well. So every single department had 1 folder to take a look at. As soon as we were required to share reports across departments, we were using linked reports to get it done. To avoid, of course, that we need to define our data sources over and over again, we were making use of shared data sets as well. to avoid over-configuring our environment. Then, as a matter of subscriptions, we were using subscriptions on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and so on. Now, the big question, where are we using Power BI for? Well, first of all, in the beginning of 2023, we were only using one workspace. One workspace only, which contains all our analytical reports. And to be fair, security, less than none. So as soon as you had a Power BI Pro license, you were good to go. You would have access to every single report in that workspace. So this might not be the ideal situation, of course, and this is something that we will be taking a look at as well. Now, if we take a look at this one from the business point of view, well, our business users were used to work with, well, Power BI, the Power BI workspace on one side, which you can see on the left, where they had some data sets, some reports available for consumption and to create some analysis as well. And on the other hand, they were having the reporting portal of reporting services with their dedicated folder. Now, at this point in time, business is actually struggling. So let's play a game. Where is the report? So, and this might seem pretty silly, but this is what happened more or less on a weekly basis. And what typically happened was, well, business enjoyed the weekend and came into the office on Monday morning, and they were just asking a question like, hey, Olivier, good morning. I'm looking for this report, and well, you know what? I can't find it. So I want to be supportive, and I'm asking, well, okay, I understand your frustration. Where did you search? Well, I searched on the reporting portal. Yeah, okay, but which one? Power BI or the reporting services portal? And at that point in time, it gets completely silent. So I'm asking an additional question. So were you looking on the gray and green portal, or were you looking on the red portal? Ah, on the gray and green portal. That's right. And at that point in time, I needed to disappoint the business user since, well, the report was located on the red portal. After they found out, they were able to find the report and continued their work as well. Of course, this really sounds silly, but it's something that is happening on a weekly basis. So this is some kind of frustration which we probably can get rid of as well. So for the current situation, if we quickly summarize, well, at this point in time, or at the beginning of this project, we were using two reporting platforms, Power BI for our analytical reports and, well, the reporting side for our paginated reports. As a matter of security, of course, in Power BI, well, we didn't have any, but on our reporting side, we had dedicated security for every single department. As a matter of data source maintenance, what I'm mentioning as well, well, we were required to maintain the data sources in both systems, so as well in Power BI and in on the reporting side as well. And then something where I ran into on my side is resource consumption. The reason why I'm mentioning this one is just because, well, especially if you're a smaller company, then it might be that you're running on a limited budget as well. And in my case, for example, I'm only allowed to have one production environment with a machine of 64 gigabytes of RAM and 8 cores. And that's all to run SQL Server, integration services, analysis services, reporting services, the Power BI data gateway, and ad hoc requests as well. So quite a lot for one machine, which, well, the resources were quite heavily used as well. So my idea was, well, if I would be able to shut down one of the services, that could free up some resources as well. That's one of the reasons why I started this project. So now that we know where we are at the beginning of this journey, it is time that we move forward. And we're going to take a brisk walk and we're going to follow the road. And while we're taking this walk, I'm already imagining what I want to achieve. And I'm imagining that, well, I want to have one reporting portal, which will be Power BI. And in that environment, I want to have my analytical reports and paginated reports living happily together. That's what I want to achieve. Now, before we get there, of course, we will be required to use a couple of steps as well. One of these things, for example, that will change is our tool for development. So instead of using Visual Studio with your reporting services extension, well, we'll be required to switch development tools to Power BI Report Builder. For those who have never seen Power BI Report Builder, well, this is it. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a screenshot of Power BI Report Builder. Well, to be honest, it isn't a very fancy tool, but it does what it needs to do. Important to know is this tool was intentionally created for developers by Microsoft. So my advice would be, don't try to hand it over to business users. I would try to avoid that. Then if we just compare both tools, the Visual Studio with the reporting service extension and Power BI Paginated Reports, one of the big differences, for me at least, was that there's no kind of solution file with Power BI Report Builder. So instead of creating one solution for every single department, where I could group my reports logically in one place, I will need to think about a different way. Could be a folder structure, could be anything I want. The second difference is, well, as soon as you start to work with Power BI Report Builder, you won't have any kind of shared data sources anymore. So if you want to start development for a paginated report, then you will need to recreate your data source over and over and over again. Don't worry, this is only during development time. As soon as you want to publish your report to the Power BI service, then you will be able to reuse existing data connections. That is fine. Now, if we continue, well, what about available data sources? Well, on the on-premise side, nothing much changes. So we still have access to SQL Server, analysis services, ODBC, and so on. But if we take a look at the cloud-end side of data sources, well, there are a couple of new ones. So for example, Power BI datasets. You can finally use Power BI datasets for paginated reports. What I was thinking about, since I'm still on-premise, is, well, what if I already create my Power BI dataset with a live connection to my analysis services model? And then if I ever want to change from on-premise to the cloud, well, I just need to change my dataset slightly, but I don't need to have an extensive migration path for that one. Well, I tried it out, I failed fast. It doesn't work. So if you want to connect from a Power BI dataset to an analysis services model, you will be required to use the import mode. Live connection will not work, just that you know. Then, of course, we have Azure SQL DB available as well, Azure Analysis Services, Synapse as well, and Databricks. The last thing I would like to mention about Power BI Report Builder is something about the built-in expressions, which are pretty important from my point of view, at least. The first one I would like to mention is the execution time, which, well, if you want to use this one and you use it in one of your paginated reports, well, if you're executing the paginated report on your local machine, this will show you the local time on your local machine. As soon as you deploy or publish your report to the Power BI service, well, then it will be providing you the UTC time. This is only a slight difference, but it can make a big difference if you need to find out what is going wrong. So just that you know. Then if you use the report name expression, built-in expression, then just know it is not you, but if you're executing your report locally, it won't show you anything. But as soon as you publish your report to the Power BI service, then it will show you the report name as you named your report in the workspace. And finally, pretty important for row-level security is the user ID. If you're executing your report locally, then this will be showing you the empty account name or domain name / username. But as soon as you publish your report to the Power BI service, then it will provide you the user principal name or the email address of the user who is executing the report. Just some slight differences that are pretty important. Now, let's talk very quickly about the Power BI workspace as well. And if we take a look at the right-hand side of the screen, you can see report number 1 and report number 2, both of type report. Then we have the sales report of type report as well. Well, this is fun. Well, the first two are paginated reports. The third one is an analytical. The only distinction you can make is based on the icon. So for the paginated reports and for the analytical report. That's the only distinction. So this might be slightly confusing as well. Now, this was everything I used to know. So while I was starting on this journey, I found out something else as well, which is a Power BI app. So since I was thinking about, well, how can I handle my security in a better way? I was thinking about it should be in Power BI, no? So I was starting to take a look at some things, and I ran into Power BI apps where we have a couple of things which are called sections and audiences, and where sections actually can mimic some kind of folder structure. So I can group my sales reports, my logistics reports, my finance reports, and so on. And then with audience as well, I can determine which set of users can have access to which report. So this would be my security layer, actually, for my reports, which is, of course, pretty useful. Now, if we talk about subscriptions, well, it is important to know that everything is dependent on your licensing model. So if you are running on a dedicated capacity, then you're good to go. You don't need to worry about anything. But if you're not, well, important to know is for every recipient for a subscription needs to have a pro license. So that's pretty important to know. Now, we can still have our time-based subscriptions, so hourly as possible, daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. But then, until last year in August, data-driven subscriptions were not supported out of the box in Power BI. In August last year, Microsoft announced dynamic subscriptions, and it became available in preview. Well, if I'm right, a couple of weeks ago, actually, or a couple of months ago, which is pretty useful. This is something that can mimic the same experience as we had in reporting services with data-driven subscriptions. In the past, I've seen solutions to get it done in another way with Power Automate, or what I did, for example, was I had SQL Server in the backend. So I was actually calling stored procedures to get my results and to send out emails myself. Could be done as well. Of course, with the dynamic subscriptions becoming available in preview, this is not required anymore. The last thing I want to mention about subscriptions as well, what I like to do is, if my overnight load of my data warehouse fails, I would like to disable all my subscriptions. Unfortunately, as of today, I still don't know any kind of way to use one of the REST APIs to disable my subscriptions. So what I did, for example, since I'm running stored procedures in the backend to get my data, the first thing I do in these stored procedures is finding out if my overnight load was successful or failed. If it failed, I just raise an error to make sure I don't deliver any data. I rather send out no report than a wrong report. That's the reason why I'm doing that. Cool. Now that we know all of this, we actually reached the very first intermediate peak of that mountain. And we can already enjoy the view. We can clearly take a look where we were coming from, what we learned so far. And now it is time to continue the journey and really to go and talk about migration. So we're continuing our journey, and we are taking the path, and well, we're coming into action. So we need to choose which way we are going to take. Do we choose the route, or do we choose the route on the right, which is the more automated route? Well, we're first going to the left and see what's required. So if we choose the one-by-one way, then we will be required to execute a couple of steps. So first, we will be required to locate the RDL file. We're going to open it up in Power BI Report Builder, change the data source connection, and this one is important, especially if you were using shared data sources. We're going to execute the report for testing purposes, since we always test up front. And finally, we're going to publish the report to the Power BI service. And then we just need to repeat step 1 to 5. It can be as easy as this. Of course, for 1 to 20 reports, it is fine. If we're talking about 100 or even 1,000 reports, well, it might be a bit too time consuming. So if we just take a couple of steps back Or before we get there, and this was something I was forgetting, a couple of tips before we go back is, well, first of all, if you were using shared data sources, well, then please take a look at this one. As soon as you're going to change your data source connection, the data source icon should be changing. The reason why is if you're opening up a report or paginated report, which is making use of a shared data source, you will have a very small shortcut sign next to the dataset symbol or icon. As soon as you change it, it will disappear. Then, if you want to deploy reports which are making use of sub-reports, you will be required to deploy your sub-reports first, and only afterwards the main report. Otherwise, it won't work. The reason why is, well, in the sub-reports section, you will be required to point to the location where you deployed the sub-report in the Power BI service. Then, just as a side note as well, if you're working with sub-reports or if you're adjusting sub-reports, you will be required to redeploy the sub-report and redeploy the main report as well. Otherwise, your report will break. Cool. Now, let's go to the more automated way. So there actually are two different possibilities. We can say, well, we can make use of SSRS if we're lucky, or we can choose to use an open source tool. If we first take a look at option number one, which is executing the migration by using the publish button in reporting services, well, it is important to note that if you're running on a specific version which is older than the 1047 build, then it's not supported. Otherwise, you can use it. The only reason I know this is because I run into it by accident. So on my production environment, I had SQL Server Reporting Services version 15.0.11.02.9.11 installed, where I didn't have this publish button available. And I did have administrator rights. So it could have been because of access rights. And on my local machine, I only had one more recent build installed, and there I had it. So it's just a matter of build version. Now, if we take a look what it would look like, well, it's just a button publish, where you can choose, well, publish all reports or select reports to publish. As soon as we choose and maybe choose a couple of reports, well, we will be required to sign in into Power BI, in the Power BI service. We need to choose a workspace, and then the migration is just going to start. Then we just need to play the waiting game. Now, as soon as the migration is done, well, we might get something like you can see on the right there, which says, well, some reports did not publish. In this case, only 3 out of 4 were published, and then it will be explaining why. In this case, a report with the same name already exists in the workspace. Or, well, a report with the same name has already been migrated as part of this migration. Something like that can happen as well. But then it's fine. You already know it's there. Now, if we use this RDL migration tool, which is a command line tool created by Microsoft, and what we will be required to do is, well, just download the source code, build it in Visual Studio, get the executable files, and then execute them. RDL migration.exe from command line, point to your report server address, specify the file path which you would like to migrate, provide the workspace name as you named the workspace in Power BI, and then we need to provide a client ID. And this probably is the hardest part of the migration. To get the client ID, well, you will be required to register an app in the Azure portal. And this app needs to have the read all workspaces permission, read write all datasets, and read and write all reports. The most easy way to get this done is by using the URL that I'm showing at the bottom of the screen. So app.powerbi.com/embed setup. This will allow you to go through some kind of wizard to get that app installed or app registered. Now, what is this tool providing as well? Well, first of all, it's providing a conversion log that you can just have a look which report has been migrated successfully or failed, and we'll be providing an output folder as well. And as you can see, the original file as well. My advice here would be, well, if you're using this method, get all the converted files, and get them into Azure DevOps or into Source Control in general, actually, is a great advice. It's something I'm using all the time. Now, there's one thing where I was really silent about. What about subscriptions after migrating from reporting service to Power BI Paginated Reports? Well, let's say that the subscriptions are like these amazing birds in the picture, and let's say they're flying away. So the pain point about migration from reporting services to Power BI is that subscriptions are not migrated automatically. So what you will be required to do is recreating every single subscription by hand. I couldn't find any way to automate it, unfortunately. But this is something that you will need to keep in mind as well, and to make sure that you plan enough time to do this. Now, I've been talking quite some time. I think we already reached a decent level, and I think it's time to get more practical right now. So let's climb to the top all together. So what are we going to do? So first of all, I've opened up my web browser. I signed into Power BI, and I hope this should be large enough. So what did I do today? I have created a couple of workspaces. First of all, workspace number 1, where I'm going to show you how to execute the migration manually. Then workspace number 2, how to execute it by using the publish button and reporting services. And finally, how to execute the report, execute a report migration by using the RDL migration tool. So first things first, if I just open up my very first workspace, there's nothing there yet, and we're going to execute the migration manually. So I'm opening up my Visual Studio solution where my report was living, report number 3, as you can see, and I'm just going to right-click on my solution and open folder in File Explorer to make sure I can locate my RDL file. So logistics. And right here is my RDL file, and I'm going to, I opened the wrong one. Anyway, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to write folder where I want to have it. There we go. And I'm going to save. And now I'm going to open up the report in Power BI Report Builder. This might take a while, but it should be quite okay. There we go. And the first thing that we need to do right here is, well, we need to go to data sources. And then we need to take a look at our data source. Now, as you can see, this is what I was mentioning before. Next to the dataset symbol or data source symbol, there is a very small shortcut sign, which means I was using a shared data source. So we need to adjust our data source first. So I'm just opening up the connection manager. The name is fine. Then what I can tell you, but because of personal experience, is, well, today I'm going to I'm going to connect. Sorry, I'm going I'm going to connect to an Azure SQL database. What I could do, well, if I would just keeping SQL Server as connection type, create my connection string, and try to execute the report locally, it would be working just fine for some reason. But as soon as I try to publish my report, it will go wrong. So better off with choosing the right connection type from the start. So build. And let's see if I can remember it well. Bite-size data.database.windows.net from the first time. SQL Server authentication. There probably are better ways to do this, but just for demo purposes, I'm using SQL Server authentication, which is more than fine for today. There we go. I'm going to save it for today. There we go. And right now, I just need to choose my database. Adventure Works LT is fine. I'm going to test my connection, and the test connection succeeded. Okay. And if I now confirm, well, if we take a quick look again at the data source, the short symbol disappeared. So we know we changed data sources. If I now just execute my report for testing purposes, then there we go. Well, I know for some reason there is no data in my first 3 columns. For some reason, Power BI Report Builder is doing this sometimes, and always when I'm demoing. So at least I get some data in column number 4, which makes sure that, well, my report is working. So if I go back to design mode, I can choose the publish button over here. And now I can just connect to my workspace. Might take a while. So manual migration workspace, giving my report a name, well, report number 3, sales by shipment method, if I'm right, shipment method, and I'm going to choose publish. As soon as the report gets published, well, there we go, success. We can go back to the Power BI portal, hit the refresh button. I should be there. Luckily it is. And if I now open up the report, might take some time, a couple of seconds. There we go. I have my report migrated. That's the first way to do it. Of course, if you would be deploying to a brand new Power BI tenant, you will be required to create your data source as well. This is something I have done already up front, just to avoid that I need to fiddle out with credentials and data connections during the demo today. So that is something that you still will be required to do. Now, this is the manual migration. Now, and for some reason, this is showing up. No, come on. Anyway, so right now, I have opened up reporting services. And just to show you, I have a hidden folder, data sources, with my data source, of course. Then I have my dedicated folders for my departments. And if we take a look at the sales folder, I actually have a deployed reports folder, which is hidden, where my original deployed reports are. And then I have 2 linked reports as well to the reports in the deployed reports folder. This is the way I used to work with reporting services. Now, if we want to migrate this, well, it is very straightforward. If we just navigate to the right-hand side and we go to publish and choose publish all reports, go. It's asking me to sign in into Power BI. So let's do it. Let's sign in. Yeah, that should be the one. We're signing in into Power BI, and I just need to specify my workspace. In my case, workspace number 2, and I'm going to hit the publish button. And now we can grab a coffee, grab a snack, and play the waiting game. It is this easy if you can use this method, or at least it can be this easy. And as you can see, well, for some reason, only 3 out of 6 reports were published to that certain workspace. Well, what it's actually showing me, and for some reason it's trying to migrate in this way, I know for sure I only have 3 reports in my workspace. The other 3 are linked reports. So for some reason, it's navigating through every single folder and subfolder, and every time it finds some kind of report, it just tries to deploy it. It doesn't really matter for the migration path if it's a linked report or, well, the report itself. So it just tries to migrate everything. That's the reason why I'm getting these error messages, like a report with the same name has already been migrated as part of the migration process. That's the reason why this is happening. Oh, workspace is number 2. I have my 3 reports. If I open up report number 1, same drill, playing the waiting game, in this case, choosing a category as well, and view report, I get my report and my results. I know these aren't very, very fancy reports. Unfortunately, I'm no designing wonder, so this is what I have and what I can. So, but it works. That's the most important, of course. So this is how you can execute your migration with reporting services, which is fairly straightforward, if you ask me. So right now, let's take a look at option number 3, or automate option number 2, which is by using the RDL migration tool. Before I start with this, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away in the chat on that. I'm more than happy to answer them, just that you know. Cool, so I've opened up the GitHub repository of the RDL migration tool. And as you can see, it's just a plain GitHub repository. And actually, the RDL migration tool is documented pretty well. So it's explaining what we need to do, where we need to think about. It's actually a very straightforward manual as well to execute it. And the first thing we need to do is, well, we just need to grab the code and clone it to our local environment, something I did already. And I opened it up in Visual Studio. And what we are going to do is, well, important to know is if you're just downloading the code from the repository, it will only work for premium capacity. And to show you, and that's something I didn't do previously, well, my workspaces over here are premium capacity as well, just because I'm using a Fabric trial. Don't worry, you can get it to work without dedicated capacity. So I'm back over here, and I'm going back to Visual Studio. If we want the migration tool to work with non-dedicated capacity, we just need to make a very small change into one of the files. I already created a pull request for this one to get it into the main branch of the RDL migration tool, but it wasn't approved yet. So if I quickly show you what I did, view history, just difference between both. The only thing I did was, well, removing the check where it's finding out if it's running on dedicated capacity. I just removed these, well, and it works like a charm. So not too bad to deploy to non-dedicated workspaces. The reason why this check was there was because Paginated Reports previously, until the end of 2022, if I'm right, was a premium feature. Only in the beginning of 2023 or the end of 2022, it became a pro feature. That's the reason why this check is in there actually. So I did made the change. I'm right-clicking on my solution. I'm just going to say build. It is going to build the project, and then I can actually navigate to get the executable files. So to get there, well, RDL migration, bin, debug. I just need to copy these files and get them onto a dedicated location. In my case, well, RDL migration tool, and I just pasted them over here. I'm quickly going to remove this one since that was from my previous try, and these ones as well. I forgot to clean it up for some reason. But this is what we just copied from the build output. Now let's try to use, I'm going to open up PowerShell. There we go. And don't worry, it isn't too hard. So I'm zooming in slightly. I'm first going to navigate to my folder. There we go. As you can see, I have my RDL migration.exe file over here. That's the one we're going to use. So quickly going to clear my screen. What are we going to do? Well, RDL migration.exe. And we're going to point to our report server location. So I'm navigating back to my reporting services portal. It's not completely right what I'm going to do, but I will be making an adjustment later on. So report server. And always make sure it gets written like this. There we go. Then we need to provide the folder that we would like to migrate. Since I'm using linked reports, I'm going to point to my deployed reports folder to avoid any issues. So, well, in my case, sales/deployed reports. And then I need to provide the workspace where I want to deploy to. So if we go to Power BI, workspace number 3, there's one. Okay, copy. Going back, go. And finally, we need to provide the client ID. To get this, I'm just opening up the URL that I provided earlier as well. I'm just going to choose embed for your customers. It's going to ask you to sign in into Power BI. I already did up front. And then we just need to follow all the steps. So sign into Power BI, next, register your application, just provide a name, RDL migration tool, for example. This. Then which API access do you require? Well, as mentioned, read all workspaces, read-write all datasets, and read-write all reports. Then we just say register, and we wait for a couple of minutes or seconds. So what we can see right now, I'm just going to skip these steps since they're not important for now. And if we take a look at the right-hand side of the screen, we can see the application ID. This actually is the client ID that we need to provide. Now, let's say you were a bit too eager and you closed this window already. You can easily go to the registrations. Go. view all applications, and right over here, as you can see, I have my RDL migration tool. There we go. And then we can find the application or client ID over here, which we can easily copy and use. If you forgot to, well, specify one of the access rights or credentials, well, you can easily go to the API permissions on the left over here, this one. And if you then scroll down, you can easily add permissions as well. So that's the way if you forgot and you already closed the previous page. You get it? Come on, thank you. And now I just still need to grant permissions, which is something I could have done in the other screen as well. There we go. Consent of my organization, yes. Cool. Now we're good to go. So if we go back to PowerShell and we just hit execute, starting the login window. I'm signing in with my Power BI account. It starts conversion and uploading reports. It's first going to tell us, well, I found 2 reports, at least hopefully. Otherwise, I made a mistake in the syntax. There we go. Whew. Report 1 deployed. Report 1 deployed successfully or migrate successfully. Report 2 as well. There we go. That's how it is done. Now let's do it one more time with my logistics reports. So logistics, same drill, signing in. Choose your account to sign in. 1 report found, 1 report migrated. So that's how you do it with the RDL migration tool. If we now go to the reporting portal, or to Power BI at least, every refresh, we can see every single report again. As you can see, I'm not going to try to open them right now, but we're going to take it to the next level and we're going to use the Power BI app functionality. So I'm going to navigate to the 3 dots in the middle, more, create app. Then we need to provide a decent description. Well, for today, it will be, well, workspace number 3. Sorry about that. But that's what I'm going to do for today. And we're going to add content. And right here, we can choose add content and choose every single report we would like to integrate. So I'm just going to add all 3. There we go. And now it is time, well, to mimic our folder structure that we want. So I'm going to choose the more options. I'm going to say add new section. In my case, section number 1 will be sales and section number 2 will be logistics. Logistics, there we go. And now I can easily drag and drop my reports in the right section, or I can use the more options functionality to move it somewhere as well. There we go. And probably I want to switch over places. And there we go. Now we're good to go. Our content is divided into a couple of sections, and it is time to define our audiences as well. There we go. First thing I want to do, well, for today, and don't look at this one. I never did this. I'm just going to say entire organization. I wouldn't do it in production either, but just for today, since I only have 1 user to use, this is fine. But I'm going to add an audience for sales, which is allowed to see the sales reports. So these 2, this one, they're allowed to see, well, these 2 reports, but not my logistics reports. To get that done, well, we can easily toggle it over here, and there we go. Well, now it is not visible anymore for the sales department. As soon as I get a security group or a specific set of users in place, of course, which I can't show you today, unfortunately, but that's how you would do it. Then we're going to define an audience for logistics to do the same drill. Logistics, they're allowed to see logistics reports, but not the sales reports. And finally, just to show you the use case, I want to have an audience for my showrooms as well. So a showroom audience, I know what, they're not allowed to see logistics reports, but they're not allowed to go in too much detail either. So I'm not going to allow them to see report number 2. This can be done as well. As soon as your sections and audiences are defined, you can easily go to the publish app button and publish your app. Go to the app, and right now we can see what we have done. So this is my app. What I easily can do is, well, I want to see what my sales audience can see. I can easily switch to any kind of audience at the top over here. That's what you can do. So sales can see report number 1 and report number 2. Logistics can only see report number 3, and showroom can only see report number 1. Now, we can also go to the all audience, of course, to see everything. Now, let's take it to the next level, and I want to show it with report number 1. We want to start to recreate our subscriptions. And as you can see, for report number 1, well, the subscribe to report button is disabled. The reason for this is, well, the report needs to be executed before you can subscribe. And since I'm requiring a parameter in this report, I only can create a subscription as soon as I configure my parameter and execute the report. It became available. So if we just subscribe to report, we scroll down to the create subscription, and right here you need to choose your subscription type. So it can be, as mentioned before, the standard subscriptions or time-based subscriptions, or the dynamic per recipient, which is the functionality for data-driven subscriptions. For today, we're just going to use a standard subscription, and then we need to provide some details. A subscription name, the recipients, well, for today it will be just me, and then the format. Well, of course, I like to get it in Excel. That's what I want. Right over here, this is pretty important. Well, because we're executing the report with certain configuration, it is going to use that configuration to create your subscription as well. If you want to override it in some kind of way, well, you probably will need to go to customize parameters and, for example, say, well, you know what, if there are defaults provided in the report, use the defaults. Might be pretty useful if you want to create a report which is always showing the sales for yesterday or for last month, for example. If you execute it, well, from February 1st till February 29th for this year, well, if you try to execute it or you want to get the same report, but then from March 1st till March 31st, well, if you can define that somehow in defaults, that will be pretty useful. And that is something you can do right over here. Then you can just define start date and end date of the subscription, the frequency, of course, when it needs to be executed, and then some more options about mailing, an email subject, a message, what you want to do. What I like to do, to be honest, if I'm sending out attachments, I'm not including a link to the Power BI report, and I'm not providing the preview in the email directly. That's what I like to do. And then I can just say save subscription. And there we go. And as you can see here, my subscription is enabled. So this is explaining to me that there must be some kind of REST API behind the scenes to enable and disable it, but I still can't find it. As you can see, I can disable my subscription, but for some reason, still no luck with the APIs. Cool. This actually is everything I want to show you during the demo today. So let's have a brief recap. So if I start over the slides. So we climbed the mountain and reached the top all together. Well done. Now, before I'm going to say goodbye, I would like to go through some limitations as well, which I felt as a limitation at the beginning of this project for me. And then, oh, that's already too far. There we go. First of all, when I just started and I had no clue and no way or no info about Power BI apps, then, well, no linked reports was a very hard limitation for me personally. Of course, by getting to know a Power BI app, this limitation, well, became obsolete, locally, of course. But then, of course, what really limitations are for me is, first of all, that I still don't have any way to disable subscriptions in the Power BI service, or at least through a REST API. And of course, for the migration, that subscriptions are not migrated. This can be really painful. I was pretty lucky that I was required to, well, let's say migrate 20-ish subscriptions, but I know people who were required to migrate more than 100 subscriptions manually, which was really time consuming. So that still is some kind of limitation from my point of view. Then, well, the benefits. What can we do more as soon as we migrated from reporting service to Power BI Paginated Reports? First of all, well, if we create a Power BI analytical report, we are able to drill through with all the filters that we enabled in our analytical report to a dedicated paginated report. That's one of the functionalities, for example, that my business users really enjoy. Then, of course, from the business point of view, what is pretty important as well, we finally only need, or the business only needs to go to one reporting environment anymore. So no hesitation where a report is. You know, if I'm going to the Power BI app, I know where to look for my report. Well, I probably need to fiddle around slightly with the sections, but I will be able to find it. And then lastly, if you're working with a dedicated capacity, well, why shouldn't you get started by leveraging the power of Power BI deployment pipelines? Of course, if you're running with pro licensing or embedded, I'm not sure, but if you're running with pro licensing, you won't be able to use this last benefit. But if you have dedicated capacity, it's pretty useful to take a look at as well. That being said, I would like to thank you for being here this evening. My name is Olivier van Steenlandt. If there are any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. If not, please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Great, amazing. Thanks. Thank you, Olivier.